Welcome to Team DataFam Tableau User Group meeting number 19. This tug works a little bit differently to other tugs because we cater for more the presenter rather than the audience. So we meet at a whole heap of different times to match when the presenter's available, so we can record the meetings, have them online. Everyone gets to benefit from that, both the presenter and the audience. So we're basically here to record meetings to send them out to a wider audience. And if you want to do a presentation, please get in touch. We've got a whole heap of TC25 presentations coming up over the next few months, as well as Visit Sydney's. And that's the one I'm just about to introduce today. But if you've got any other questions, or if you want to present at the tug yourself, please email me at team.datafam@gmail.com. So today's presentation is Fantastic Tableau Tricks, How to Avoid Them. Interesting title, because it's really good content, by Steve. Steve presented this at Visit Sydney. When I say a few weeks ago, it was almost a month ago. But yeah, a whole heap of different tricks and tips and how to avoid using them depending on the circumstances. So I'll hand it over to you, Steve.
Thanks, Chris. I'll just get set up. Give me 2 ticks.
Yep.
Hopefully you're seeing a Visit Sydney intro, but you're not actually at Visit Sydney. My apologies for that. And let's just check we can go through them. So thanks very much, Chris. I want you all to picture something. It's late in the evening and a morning deadline is looming and you're totally stuck. Tableau has you completely stumped. The user's ask is out of your grasp and you don't know what to do. You know there's a better way to solve this, but it's just not in your control right now, or it'll take you just too long. A bit of research and you find a trick. Phew, you can probably still make the deadline. The trick is a bit hacky, but it'll get things working, so you go ahead, forget all about the hack, and sleep like a baby. But a month later, the trick catches up with you. The workbook doesn't cater for a change in the data, or a teammate has to make some adjustments, and the trick totally catches them out. It's hard not to feel judged, and if you're honest, you're probably your own harshest critic. You knew there was a better way at the time, and it's looking like a tough week ahead to get this sorted. Now, if this even resonated a little bit, I want you to remember you're not alone. My name's Steve Wood, and I have a love-hate relationship with hacks. I've been working with Tableau for over a decade, data and systems even longer, and I'm a third-term Tableau Forums ambassador. Over that time, I've seen and helped with thousands of tough Tableau problems. Now, before I start, it's confessional time. I have to admit, I do love a good Tableau trick. Perhaps there are similarities with why people climb mountains. Part of me rebels at the idea that something cannot be done, and pushing the boundaries of Tableau is a great way of learning about the product. But on a day-to-day basis, we want to follow a well-trodden path, using easy to understand and maintain product features. We want to bypass that mountain summit, and we certainly don't want our team members to have to keep climbing that summit. And that's why today I'd like to talk to you about fantastic Tableau tricks, and perhaps more importantly, how to avoid them. Let's get straight into the first challenge, and a trick I hear about a lot. You need multi-select or interdependent parameters. Is it even possible? Well, in this view, we're looking at the percent of overall sales that were for a selected subcategories. What we're interested in here is the blue chunk at the bottom is showing me the percent of sales that were for phones within the technology category. I'm using a parameter because I don't want to filter the data. I want to choose a subset to highlight. So the calc here is saying if the subcategory is the selected subcategory, then stick it in the blue chunk. Otherwise, stick it in the gray chunk, all others. The challenge we have here is that we can only select one item for each parameter, and we can't show relevant values only to show just the subcategories for selected category. Parameters just don't work that way at the moment. One common trick is to build custom selectors using views that are like parameters and then parameter actions to capture selections. Using this trick, I can select multiple items. So here the black arrow is pointing to machines and phones being selected. And if I select an additional category, then only the relevant subcategories are available. So I've got office supplies and technology, and I'm just seeing the subcategories for those. To build this, each selector is a custom view. The value to show is on rows with header hidden, and the first black arrow at the top points to that. And it's also on text, and the second black arrow towards the left shows that. There is also a parameter action such that when an item is clicked, a parameter is updated to record the selection. So here we're saying that if someone has taken an action on the select category view, we'll take whatever's in the source field new p category and put it into the target parameter p category 2. The value to add to the selection is based on a calculation. What this calc is saying, if the value isn't yet in the list, add it. And if it's already in the list, remove it. And we're doing this using contains and replace. Now you'll note the pipe symbols in this calc, the upward line. That just avoids mistakes when one item starts with the value of another. So if we had pen and pencil as subcategories, we wouldn't want to, if we tried to remove pen, accidentally remove part of pencil from this pipe delimited list. Also on text is a checkbox symbol. It's a filled square when the item is in the list and an empty square otherwise. And these are just ASCII symbols. You can get them from Word or various online ASCII symbol sources. The subcategory selector view is very similar, this time with an additional filter so that only the relevant values, only the relevant subcategories are showing. And again, we're using contains here. So if the parameter category 2 contains the category, then we'll include its subcategories in the list. The chart view now just needs a tweak to the calc on color to see if a subcategory is in that pipe delimited list, again using contains. But there are some downsides of this trick. It's a lot of extra work to build and maintain. And as shown with the arrow, Tableau leaves the selected item highlighted, so it's still showing blue with that focus. You have to click it again to clear that in order to click another. Now there is an additional trick to solve this involving additional dashboard actions, but that illustrates something we often end up with, hacks on top of hacks. Now some of you might be thinking a set action would be better, saves that pipe delimited list, and you're right, but we can go a step further with set controls. With a set control, I can select more than one category and just see the relevant subcategories, and I can select more than one subcategory to view. To create a set control, I'm going to create a set in the data panel, and then I'm going to drag it onto detail, and then I'll right click and show set. And then I get a set control that looks an awful lot like a filter, but can behave like a parameter. So like a parameter, a set doesn't have to filter the view, but it can be used within a calculation, in this case, to identify which subcategories to highlight. Unfortunately, we still can't select relevant values only for a set control, but we can create a condition on a set. In this case, whether the subcategory's category was already selected. Now, those conditions don't affect the set control itself, but if we create a calc from this subset and a new set from that, that set's set control is filtered to relevant values only. There is another trick for relevant values, just doesn't help in this use case in this chart. If you have a context filter, for example, in this case, I've put selected categories in or out of set on filters and made it a context filter, then you can tell a set control to only show the values in context. Now that's worth remembering in case you need it. It just won't help with this particular use case that I've used. So for trick number 1, if we need multi-select or interdependent parameters, we could custom build those with views and parameter actions, but I'd really encourage you to check out set controls first. And the Large Twins have a great blog series, a 3-part blog series on set controls. Even if you don't use them very often, it's a really intriguing read. Trick number 2 is one of my favorites on the forums. Let's say you have a % change or an amount last month or last year, but you only want to show this for latest period. Do you need a parameter and level of detail expression? Let's take a look. In this view, we've got cumulative sales over time using a quick table calc, running sum, over sales. We want to filter to just show a period of this, but we don't want the running sum to restart at 0. So in this example here, the top right arrow is showing that I've filtered the order date down to a much shorter period, and the bottom arrow is showing that the line restarts down towards 0. And in fact, on here you can see that the total at the top right of the line is 1.2 million, whereas previously it was 2.3 million. We want to still see 2.3 million at the end. We could use a parameter and a calc to filter to dates on or after that selected date. So in this case, I've got a parameter start date, and I've said only give me the order dates that are on or after that start date. And then we could create a fixed level of detail expression to calculate sales prior to that date and add them on to the running sum of sales over the period of data that we can show in the view. So the first arrow on the left is pointing to a calc that says take my sales pre-start date and add them onto the running sum over the view. And because I've got the calculation helper expanded, I've clicked on sales pre-start date, and I can see over on the right-hand side, the second black arrow, I can see what my fixed level of detail calc is there. So it's saying sum up sales where order date is less than start date, and I fix that over the whole data set, so it doesn't matter what my filter is now. Now we get the desired behavior we want. The chart doesn't start at 0, and it still ends on 2.3 million. But it was a little bit of work, and that fixed level of detail is going to break if we add further filters. And LODs do come at a potential performance cost. Instead, Tableau's order operations give us an alternative. So table calc filters are applied after table calcs like running sum. We can make use of this. Here I have a table calc version of order month. What I've done here is I've used lookup with an offset of 0. That just returns the value for that item in the view. We do need an aggregation like min or max when we're using table calcs. So I've just said the minimum of order month here. It really doesn't matter what that aggregation is. Because we've got month of order date on the view, the min of it is just going to be whatever that month was. And the lookup is saying just look up the value in that particular part of the view or partition. And so we're just getting that order month, but as a table calc. And because table calc filters are applied after table calcs, when we filter on that table calc, we get the desired behavior. So on the right, you can see the right-hand side black arrow is pointing to us filtering on that order month TC table calc. And over on the left, the arrow is showing that we're no longer starting at 0. And you can see that we've still got 2.3 million for the total. A frequent use case of this is for a KPI card. So in this example, the first arrow is pointing to our KPI card that has an indicator showing an increase of 21.4% on sales year on year from the last year. And we're getting that still working without using a level of detail. Instead, we've got a filter on an order year that's converted to a table calc. So look up max year of order date, comma 0. So we've filtered after the percent change was calculated. For trick 2, yes, you can use parameters and LODs to get values from a prior period, but you should probably try trusty table calcs instead first. There are some great discussions on when or why to avoid LODs as well, if you can check them out. There was a recent one on the Tableau community on Slack, and if you haven't joined that, please do, because there's some really great discussions happening over there. Table calcs can help with other challenges too, like iterating over your data to roll it up and filling in some gaps in your data. So the classic example is to fill in some gaps. In this case, we've got 3 months with no sales for the copiers subcategory. And in some cases, we can use lookup with an offset of 0 and Zn to fill in the gaps. So in this case, now you can see that we've filled those gaps with zeros. Lookup is looking back, forward, across, along, whatever is in your view. It doesn't rely on a record existing if there are items before or after, and that's why this particular trick works. Another example is using previous value to build up a comma-separated list of strings. So here I want to list all of the subcategories for each category. And the previous value is just going to return the value of the whole calc from the previous item as you work across down or through the items in the view. So in this case, I've told the calc to restart for each category, and I'm adding subcategory onto the previous value with a comma in between if this isn't the first value. And just behind the calc on the view, you can kind of see that working. So we've got, for the category furniture, subcategory bookcases. The list of subcategories is just bookcases. We then work down to chairs, and the subcategories are now bookcases and chairs. The problem with this is that you can see we've still got each subcategory, and each of them has the list gradually building up. So if we also filter on last equals 0, which is the calc behind that keep calc that I've got on filters, again ensuring that that calc restarts for each category, we can just keep the last item for each category. And as long as subcategory is still in the view somewhere, detail in this case, we get the desired result. Here we've just got categories and their comma-separated lists of subcategories. You can go pretty crazy with previous value. So here I've got a Gantt chart of sessions at a conference, but each of the sessions is on its own row. I really want to compact them up so I can see what sessions I can attend without them clashing. And I can do that using previous value. You can see in the screenshot above the calc, I've compacted lecture A, panel, workshop, and lecture B onto one row, workshop and another panel and lecture B onto another, and lecture A from AI on the third row. Now this is a pretty complex calc. I'm not going to dwell on it today. It's probably a blog post or something in its own right, but you can go pretty crazy with previous value. Now, you might be thinking, hang on, that isn't a job for Tableau Desktop, and you're probably right. Previous value likely can't create you multiple streaming options to review. And for this, you'll probably want to revert to a data prep tool like Tableau Prep or Python, or maybe even use a scaffold for the missing data challenges. Tricks 5 to 7. So what if your data doesn't naturally work well in Tableau? Maybe each row in your data set might need to be handled in multiple ways. Perhaps you're relying on the special measure name and measure values pills, and you're hitting some constraints with those. Let's take a look at an example based on support tickets. In this data set, I'm just showing the Excel-based data set to start with. We have 30 tickets open and closed over January 2025. Each ticket has an open date, a status, and a close date. We want to show the number of opened and closed tickets per day, along with the number of outstanding tickets. And to start with, I try a calculation to pick the right date based on status. That's the arrow over on the left pointing to that. If status is closed, use date closed, otherwise use date opened. We see a lot of people try this approach to start with, but something is clearly wrong. I know I have 30 tickets, but I'm only seeing 6 opened in the orange bars, so orange bars are open tickets here. And the black line, which is showing the number of outstanding tickets on any given day, is just dropping way down into the negatives, which is clearly wrong. A test view shows us why. Each ticket can only be in one state on a given date. So if we're counting it as closed, we're no longer counting it as opened. One trick to solve this is to union your data. I can drag the table onto my data set again to union it to itself. When I do this, I get 2 copies of the data, and they're differentiated by some new columns, sheet and table name. The second arrow in this screenshot points to those new columns. Using those new columns, I can create calcs to treat the first set of rows as opened and the second set as closed. So looking at the arrow here, we can see for the first set of rows, we'll use date opened, and for the second set, we'll use date closed. Similarly, for the first open set, we'll say there's a +1 effect on tickets. And for the second set, when the status is closed, we'll say there's a -1 impact on tickets. Now we can create the right visualization, but there are some issues. The total tickets opened is double counted. The first black arrow points to that. And we have a null in the status legend, which the second arrow points to. And that's where the status is not closed, the second set of rows. We could filter out these nulls, and we could refactor the total tickets to only count one set of rows. But again, this does illustrate the need for hacks upon hacks. So you might be wondering if there's a better way. Well, one alternative is to relate to an expander table. The expander table has 2 rows, in this case, You see the top arrow there is pointing to me relating to the expander table. The arrow at a diagonal slightly below is pointing at what data is in that expander sheet. So we've got row set A and row set B. And we relate that with a relationship calc of 1 equals 1. That means every support ticket can have 2 sets of rows. We can now change the calcs to use that row set. For row set A, we'll use date opened, and for row set B, we'll use date closed. Similarly, for the ticket numbers calc, row set A is going to represent open tickets, and we have a +1 there, and row set B, where ticket is closed, represents the closed tickets, and hence a -1 for ticket numbers. We still have the right chart, and this time the total tickets opened is correct. Tableau is only using the relationship when it needs to, so it evaluates the joins execution time rather than when it's building the data model. So we only have double the rows when we need them, and that's the main advantage over Union. It should be more efficient. We do still need to deal with the null in legend, but to be fair, that is a basic filter. There is another option that I haven't tried yet. When Tableau introduced multi-fact relationships, we got the option to have shared dimensions. These are a scaffold table can probably help, but probably only when you already have separate open and closed data sets. Reshaping the data into a ticket event history using a data prep tool could also help, particularly if you need to handle different state changes and SLA reporting. So let's take a look at using Tableau prep to create that specific data set. Here I've got a prep flow in Tableau prep where I connect to the original support tickets data source. There are then 2 steps to create a set of ticket open events and a set of ticket closed events. And these are then combined via a union to give us a row for each ticket being opened and another row for each of the tickets that are closed. A lot of the sub-steps within each of these steps are simple right-click and rename or filter. Tableau Prep's super easy to use in that respect. Here you can see for the opened copy of the data, I've renamed date open to event date. This is the arrow over on the left. And there is also a new calculated field simply returning the text opened. That gives us an opened event and date for each ticket, which you can see in the arrow pointing at the box. The remaining sub-steps really just tidy up fields we don't need and give us a ticket count and change in tickets of 1. In the step that gives us the closed data, I just rename the status to event and filter to just keep the closed entries. And date closed simply gets renamed to the event date. This gives us a closed event and date for each closed ticket. And again, the remaining steps just tidy up fields we don't need and ensure the change in tickets is a -1 as the ticket is closed. We can now union those 2 sets of data together, giving us an open row for the ticket and a separate row for every ticket that is closed. Open and closed dates are now in the same field, event date, and we have a simple plus or -1 measure for the change in ticket numbers. With the data in this shape, the graphs are a lot easier to create in Tableau Desktop. Anyway, back to expander tables. We can also use expander tables to avoid over-pivoting. In this view, we're using the special measure names and measure values field, and we've sorted on value descending. So we see discount as the smallest, and that's appearing at the bottom. Sales with the largest amount is appearing at the top. Unfortunately, the sort order doesn't persist if we change filters. So here I've filtered down to just tables, and we can see the profit, the red one, now has still showing in second spot and discount is still showing at the bottom. This is because Tableau implements the sort as a manual sort, so naturally it won't automatically adjust when we change filters. We could pivot the data using custom SQL, or the pivot option in the data source pane, which is shown on the screen here. And that would give us an actual column for measure name, but that does introduce pain for other use of the data set. Instead, we can use an expander table here too. So in this case, I've related a measures table onto my main data set, that's shown by the top arrow. You can see the bottom right arrow, the measures table contains the 4 measures we want to compare, discount, profit, quantity, sales. And we've related again on 1 equals 1, so that every row in orders will get the potential to have 4 times the rows, one for each measure. With the expander table, we can create our own calc for measure value. So the left-hand arrow here is pointing at that calc measure val. We're saying if the measure is sales, then sum sales. If the measure is profit, then sum profit, and so on. And given that we've now got an explicit calculation, we can create an explicit sort based on that calc. So the second arrow there is saying we're sorting by measure val descending, which we couldn't do with the special measure names and measure values pills. Now when I select the tables subcategory, the measures are sorted in descending order of value like we want. Expander tables can also be used to handle overlapping periods of time. So in this forum question, James just wants to show any given row potentially contributing to yesterday, this week, and this month. Those periods of time overlap. This week contains yesterday, and this month contains this week, or at least a chunk of it. This could be done with a measure per period and then using measure names and measure values. And that's exactly what James did to start with. But he found then that he couldn't use measure names in a calc or a dashboard action such that clicking on a particular cell goes to the details for just that period only. Now we could again pivot or union, or we could use multiple sheets and combine them on a dashboard, which is what he tried to start with. But an expander table is a nice way to go, in my opinion. If you do need to handle data from a single row in multiple ways, so in summary, you could use a union or a pivot, or maybe just align multiple sheets on a dashboard, but that does leave the data set harder to work with, less efficient, or less maintainable. Instead, consider relating to an expander table, or reshape your data before Tableau in a tool like Tableau Prep. For the final 2 tricks, we're going to look at table formatting. We've all been there. Tableau is not Excel, but we've been asked to format a table just so. In this case, I have a basic table of states and measures, and I want to highlight each row depending on whether the state has a minimum or maximum for any of the measures. But I also want to highlight the header row, the state column, and I just can't do that. Now, the initial view here is using a bar chart to provide a cell background color, so that's an initial trick just off the bat. I've got min 1 on columns, and I fixed the axis range from 0 to 1, and the size of the mark is boosted up to 100%. This means that the bars totally fill the cell and just look like a background color. We use this trick quite a lot for heat maps. In this view, on screen at the moment, I've just reduced the cell size a little bit, the mark card size a little bit, so you can see they are bars. I've also removed a lot of the formatting, but none of that's really helping us. We can't color state. One trick is to use fake measures even more. Here I've typed min 1 onto columns once for state and twice for each measure. So I've got min 1 on row columns 7 times. For the ones that I've added for measures, I've right-clicked and made them dual synchronized axis, and that gives me 4 columns with a header at the top for the measures. And I get a marks card for each, which allows more formatting control. I drag the relevant field onto label for the first one, state in this case, and onto the first of each pair of marks card for the measures. I also set the color for the second pair for those measure ones to 0%, so the second bar doesn't show. In case you're wondering what that's all about, on this last screenshot, you can see that the 3 columns to the right, headed min 1, the background color for them is slightly darker than the unheaded column. So setting the background color back to 0 for one of the marks card just means we get the same consistent color across. Now, once I've done this, I can untick show header for state on rows, edit each bottom axis to remove title and tick marks, and edit each top axis for the measure columns to set a title. Unfortunately, though, I can't get rid of the bottom axis entirely. I can shrink it a little bit, but it'll also shrink the top one. And if I right-click and try to unshow it, it'll unshow the top one as well. And that is a downside of this particular trick. Also, it can be really difficult to juggle all of the marks cards when they have the same label, ag min 1. So you can see the arrow here pointing to all those different marks cards. It can get a bit fiddly working out now which one of those ag min 1 marks was actually the quantity label. We can fix this last pain point by double-clicking into the pills on columns and typing / and a name plus Shift and Enter. And that'll give it kind of like a fake name. But this could cause more confusion as colleagues won't find that as a field. So in this case, the top arrow is pointing at me typing / HDR state for header state. And then you can see the second arrow shows that the marks card now has the label ag header state. But some people will expect that to be a measure over in the, or a data point over in the left-hand data panel, and you just won't find it there. An alternative is to repurpose grand total rows. So here I'm switching on column grand totals and showing them at the top. Grand totals are evaluated in a second run over the data, and we can detect that with a calculation. So min state will be the same as max state in a detail row because we're only showing one state, but not in the grand total row where we're rolling things up for all of the states. So in that case, we can output text for the column heading state. So in the calc, the second arrow here, we're saying if the min state is equal to the max state, we want to just show the state, otherwise output the text state, which gives us our column header. We can do the same for each measure. Here, the sum of sales is only output for the detail rows where min state equals max state, and nothing or null without an else is output otherwise. And then when the opposite is the case, when the min state is not equal to the max state, and we must be in that grand total, we can have a calc which returns the column heading, in this case, sales. Both of these calcs end up getting put on the text label, which means we can include both when we're editing the label. Safe in the knowledge that only one will be shown in any given cell. Now, these tricks aren't without their downsides. There was quite a lot of work still to do that, and grand totals aren't always that intuitive to reuse. An alternative is to use map layers. Now, you can have as many map layers as you want, but you're now responsible for telling Tableau each and every coordinate to plot as a point or a label. So this is a single sheet trellis chart where you've got a graph and a table, all done with one sheet. But in here, we've had to tell Tableau quite a lot about where to plot things. So in the example here, the right-hand arrow, the diagonal one, is pointing at a coordinate for country heading. So we've said make point 13, -3. We're particularly telling Tableau to plot the text like Argentina, Brazil, and Canada at the point 13, -3. But we've also had to create points for each item in the table. So the left-hand arrow is pointing at a few of those. So we need to do that for each item in the table, each line in the table, the points for each month in the line chart, the points for the month and the sales min-max to use for the axis. So it's not for the faint-hearted. The natural alternative is to use dashboard or viz extensions. If you can, it's going to be a lot less work. So in this example, there's a table extension from Tableau, which allows much more formatting control over tables. You don't have to do all of that work yourself. So to summarize trick 8 and 9, for more control over table formatting, you could use fake measures to gain full marks card control, and you could repurpose grand totals for headers. But you should check out dashboard and viz extensions if you can. Map layers are an option, but they're an awful lot of work. And sorry to those of you hoping for the export formatted to Excel trick. That's a whole different topic. It's fine for me to talk about how to avoid tricks, but there is a bit of an elephant in the room, eh? A good number of you will find barriers to better approaches, whether it's your own knowledge and confidence, a lack of tools and access, or an organizational culture that just doesn't want to tackle these barriers. So let's talk about them. If the barriers are your own skills, knowledge, or confidence, that's great news. It's in your control to tackle, and you're doing it already by watching this presentation. You can learn. You can tag along with more experienced teammates. You can attend user groups, read up on features. The Tableau help pages are excellent for this. Make a habit of reading 1 or 2 blog posts from the weekly DataFam roundup, and participate in the community forums where you'll see different solutions from different people. But what if the barrier is a lack of tools or access? So I'll ask a quick question. How many of you have a creator license for Tableau Desktop? With that, you get Tableau Prep. And how many of you have challenges that could be solved by Tableau Prep? Preparing and shaping your data well for analysis and visualization is one of the best things you can do to avoid hacks. Of course, being able to schedule prep flows is a different thing. So what if the challenge is budget? Well, there is hope. If you're doing important things manually each week or month, and ideally this would be something for senior management or your board, you can work out how much time it takes and do the math. Remember, you cost more than just your salary as well. There's office, space, equipment, training. Now, it's not unusual to see a figure of something like 100 Australian dollars an hour when you're doing this kind of calculation. And in the example here, I've said if you were spending 3 hours a week doing data prep at about $100 an hour cost to your organization, that's over $15,000 per year. And that pretty quickly justifies a license or some automation. Often a solution will pay for itself, particularly if it's not just you, and you can put forward a business case. In a lot of ways, now is a great time to suggest cost efficiency, as it's getting a lot of heat in industry generally. The final tip here is to try and slot into large projects or initiatives. Justifying 15,000 a year by yourself is often quite hard, but when someone's already spending 2 or 3 million on a large project, perhaps it's quite easy to slot some extra spend into that. What if it's more than IT that IT just won't allow something? For example, extensions. I guess what I'd say here is it all extensions or only certain ones? And what are the concerns? Are the hacks and workarounds you're otherwise doing visible to IT? And do they like those any better? Are they part of coming up with solutions? Do they want to be? How can you work towards a partnership? One thing I can say is there should be tools and training for analysts to prepare data. And there should be a process and governance for tech to not have to support or inherit things that are hard to support. Both perspectives are perfectly valid. Sometimes your culture just isn't ready to remove these barriers. I've experienced two ways of influencing culture: top down, for example, return to office, and bottom up. A combination works best, so if you can get a senior leader on board, it will really help. The two times I've really seen this work were in a cross-functional setting. We had an example where we really had to change mindsets about understanding our customers, and bringing findings back and sharing them with the wider business really switched people's eyes on. So we've got comments like, I always thought customers hated that part of the process because we do. It turned out customers loved it, and it was just us that hated it. Pairing data analysts with data engineers was another example. I can see light bulbs switch on. Ah, that's what that data means. Or wow, I now know what's involved in modeling the data and adding new fields. For me, there are complementary skills at play here. An engineer will often explain that users only see the tip of the iceberg, and many of you will have seen this analogy. So if you're a data engineer, the very tip of the iceberg is delivering a visualization, say, and what people don't often see is the work on definitions, modeling, data engineering, data storage, quality, cleaning. However, if you're an analyst or business user, you likely have your own iceberg perspective. So where a data engineer sees a finished analysis, the tip of the analysis iceberg, an analyst knows all the work put into that, the analysis, data storytelling, pre-attentive attributes, the list could go on. And again, both perspectives are right. If you overlay those perspectives, so overlaying the analyst perspective on the data engineer perspective, you'll find a sweet spot in the middle where collaboration really helps. Sharing of domain knowledge and intended usage will really help with definitions and modeling. And sharing of modeling and data cleaning challenges will really help an analyst to understand edge cases. So if you're in IT and you can befriend an analyst, please do. And if you're an analyst and you can befriend a data engineer, do. One-to-one relationships are one way bottom-up culture change can slowly happen. And I'll leave you with another tip there. Remember that other person wants to feel good, valued, that they're doing good work. So positive reinforcement will really help. I have seen it work. In summary, tricks can get you out of trouble when you need them, but we do find that hacks attract other hacks. They are by nature and often harder to support, and we do say keep it simple for a reason. You can avoid hacks or tricks by knowing better alternatives, or leveraging the wider Tableau or data toolset, for example, for data prep. Now, that may require some personal growth, e.g., influencing your organizational culture. So if I could roll these tricks up to you into one simple takeaway, it would probably be, don't let people tell you what you can't do in Tableau, but please do remember that someone must maintain and support it. Thank you.
That was awesome.
Cheers,
Any
Chris.
questions? I know Viraj had a question about your image.
Yeah, definitely the one with the iceberg analogy. I love it. And definitely I need one. There is an ongoing discussion, so that will really help me.
I'm very happy to share that image if you want it, Raj.
And I believe your solution around the uh, previous value is really helpful. And I remember we had some discussion over a chat that I had to show something as a list. So that is really a handy trick. Thank you for sharing it.
No worries, I'm glad it helps.
Any other questions? Everyone's a presenter, so you can just unmute and ask if you want to. There was a few questions. There was a few comments in the chat as we were going, but yeah, the same thing is just like, oh my god, that sort of stuff.
And just having to skim through them. Thanks, Ken.
Yeah. Awesome. If you want to contact Steve, there's all these contact details. Again, Tableau Public, LinkedIn, X, on the website, or obviously on the forums as well.
It was an awesome presentation, Steve. Loved it.
No worries. Thanks, Gaurav.
Not many use the set controls as it's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
We usually go, and even the table calculations are they're not very unexplored kind of feature. Most of them just get into LOD, and while it's very powerful, because it runs in the runtime, it has its cost.
Yeah, absolutely.
Lovely. I'll use these tips. Thank you.
No problem.
It's always tricky. Everyone sort of goes for well, I say LODs, but LODs, LODs, it doesn't matter. But everyone wants to sort of do the syntax all the time. And I always found that, table calcs, if you do a quick table calc, it's clicking the mouse. There's no code to write. But if that's the solution, it makes it easier, right?
Yeah, great call.
And prior to LODs, all we had was table calcs. So you have to be creating table calcs. So LODs kind of relieved some of the pressure, but still table calcs has this use cases.
Yeah, so I think we all remember a time when there wasn't level of detail at all. So, right, you had to find another solution. But these days it's easier because it's there.
Yeah.
I get why people find table calcs restrictive at times. There's definitely things you can't do. Using them in onward calculations can be a pain. You've got to work through tricks like using previous value and filtering to last equals 0, which is kind of a hack on a hack in a way. So I get why LODs, that there's a time and a place.
Yeah.
And even the one that you talked about, the measure values and measure names, even if it's very useful, we can't use that in calcs much. So the one you mentioned with the expanded table, how we can use it, it should come inbuilt in my view.
Yeah, I'll just comment on Paul's observation there. Order of operations was one of the biggest things that helped me, having a read of that. I go back to it so often. If something's not working the way you want, quite often it's down to that.
And pitching of a tug I can't even remember where it is, in a few weeks' time, Jim Dana is doing his order of operations presentation as well. So,
awesome.
Sort of going through the whole of order of operations. And you're dead right. As soon as something's not working properly, I always say that order of operations is the rules that you cannot break. So as soon as someone's tried to do something, it's just like order of operations. You can't break it. You have to work with it. You don't have a choice because that's how it works. Really.
And right, and I do love that most of our challenges or solution is around that order of operations. So I always have this printed and on my desk continuously in front of me. Just probably, yeah, we have to know where you are at and what you're going to do about it.
Nice.
And Jim sort of wrote the expanded list as well. Like the original Tableau diagram had what, maybe 5 or 6 levels in it. And I think Jim's has got like 17
Yes.
levels in it, because it's just you have to go down to that detail sometimes to go exactly which one is before which one, and that allows you to do other things like even that Steve was showing today.
That's a great question. If you Google Tableau order of operations, I'm pretty sure the short list comes up first, but there's a number of other images that come up for me. Pretty sure one of them is the expanded list.
Or look for Jim's site, or look for his TUG meeting. I think it's the middle-ish of August.
Nice.
I'll check and give you some dates as well.
I love the value proposition part as well, like how much time goes into the prep, and we ourselves cost anyways, being in the office and hourly rate and all this stuff, and this reduces the effort. That's a very good proposition to talk to executives on that, because they don't really appreciate the features that can help on the ground. Yeah, I'm going to steal some of those, Steve.
No problem at all. You go for it. Just don't blame me if it doesn't work out.
The scariest thing on some of those, when that calculation goes up even worse, you see people doing a lot of manual data prep. And I always say, so what happens if you did it wrong? Like if you're doing 4 or 6 hours of copying and pasting in Excel, and you do something wrong and you actually stuff up the result, how do you do it again? And more than a few times you see people go, oh, you just start it from the start. Right. So you've just lost 6 hours because you've missed out on something, and to fix it, you go back and do it again. That makes it a 12-hour operation, not a 6-hour operation. And then people they spend their whole week organizing data rather than actually analyzing and doing a better business value with their data. Is they're stuck trying to do something in Excel. It's like, hook up to the database, use Tableau Prep, have these things automated. It's got to help. There you go. Viraj is in the comments putting in all the good links. Thank you.
Perfect.
Those are the ones I've already bookmarked. So I know everyone who asks around it. I have it in my bookmark.
Just there straight away. Easy. So we'll move on to Fast 5. As everyone knows, just 5 quick questions, quick answers, personal type questions. There's no right or wrong answer. It's just what you feel is the best answer for you. And with that, Steve disappears. Maybe he turned his camera off.
Yeah, this is the scary bit.
Not that scary. Okay. Number 1, do you prefer to start with data exploration or sketch your visualization concept first?
Oh, great. Probably mostly data exploration, because you don't really know what you're going to visualize until you've explored the data. But for, say, IronVis entries, often it will start with a concept sketch. Not that I submit too often on that.
Awesome. See, easy question. How do you decide when a dashboard has too many elements versus not enough?
Great question. Maybe when people stop using it. Isn't it always the trick? Less is often more, eh? You just get a sense when it's got too much going on and it's not really answering the question. I think a lot of the challenge, though, is we're often trying to answer questions that we don't really know yet or understand. And so there's the temptation to put just a little bit more on in case a question comes up. It's a very fine balance.
Perfect. And do you prefer guided storytelling or exploratory dashboards?
Ooh, I don't really have a preference there. I think there's a time and a place for either. I do like taking people through a data story, trying to lead them to the conclusion I've found. But I do find a lot of people don't always react well to that. They kind of like to go through the journey themselves. So exploratory dashboards have their place. Yep,
perfect. And do you prefer fixed size dashboards or automatic sizing?
Well, I've been on the fence all the way through, so I'm going to go fixed size here.
Easy. And
I'm
the last
floating.
And floating. That's cool.
Just
And
a
the last
test
one's
basis.
probably the easiest. What's your favorite part about working with Tableau?
It's got to be just there's something just fundamentally exciting about exploring and finding things in data, and the tool's just a natural at that. So dashboarding is one thing, right? But digging into data and finding stuff, probably its reason for existence and the thing I most enjoy.
Awesome. Perfect. Okay, that was 5 easy questions, right?
Phew.
So the next tug is in a few days' time on July the 3rd, depending on where you are in the world. But if you're in Europe, if you're in the US, it's the day before, late on the 2nd. So Nick and Christian talking about breaking boundaries, exploring community and headless BI. So that's going to involve some of the VizQL data service as well. That's just been announced. But if you've got the time, join into that meeting. The QR code's on the screen, or you can find it on the user group website as well and join. And obviously, if you join the user group, you'll get announcements of all the future meetings and when they're actually announced as well. And you can join that one actually on the day or look at the recording later on. So this session, that session we were just talking about, everything that Team DataFam Tug does, and all the other online tugs as well. All those recordings are available on YouTube at Team DataFam. You can watch them on YouTube or listen to them on Spotify and Apple. There's podcasts there. Just search for Team DataFam to find those podcasts. If you want to present, or if you've got any questions, or if there's any other things you want to talk to me about, email me at team.datafam@gmail.com. So thank you, Steve. Awesome presentation again. I think the key thing with that is I was watching Lewis's presentation the other day about renaming the min zero calculations on the marks card. And I just went, I wonder if he can do that on row and columns. And I tried it out the other day and I went, that's got to be the best hack that I've never seen before. And then you showed it and I went, yeah, I saw it. I saw you do that weeks ago and I just forgot about it. And then Lewis's one reminded me. I said, I've got to do that more to remember it, because it just saves you having min zeros all over the place when you can't tell the difference between them all. So
For sure.
awesome. A good memory jogger.
And a quick thank you to you, Chris, for organising today and for everyone coming along and listening.
Yep, not a problem at all. And if we've got some time, everyone's a presenter, so you can unmute yourselves, turn on your cameras if you want to, whichever. Or if not, that's the end of the presentation. There was something in chat that I missed. Oh, that's just Viraj saying good session. Viraj has put a whole heap of links in the chat as well, which is always good. And then the silence.
Nah.
Thanks a lot, Steve.
No worries. Thank you. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
Thanks, Steve.
Awesome. That looks like the end. Everyone's
Yep.
starting to log off. Okay. Thanks
Cheers,
for your
Chris.
time. Talk to you
Catch
soon.
it. Bye.
Thanks a lot. See ya. Bye.